Germany had tasted naval dominance, and it had liked it. Just before World War I, the German High Seas Fleet was the second most powerful navy in the world, wielding a fearsome force with over 16 dreadnoughts, 5 battlecruisers, 25 light cruisers, and 20 pre-dreadnought battleships. The fleet quickly became a real threat to the British Royal Navy's naval supremacy. But the tide of World War I eventually swamped Germany. In its aftermath, the once great fleet lay submerged in the shallows of Scapa Flow, a desperate act to prevent its capture by the British. The Treaty of Versailles then strangled the remnants of Germany's maritime might, leaving it with but a pale shadow of its former fleet, barely sufficient to guard its own shores. However, from the embers of defeat, a fiery ambition was reborn. With Hitler's ascent, dreams of resurrecting the High Seas Fleet emerged. Admiral Erich Raeder laid before the Führer a bold vision, Plan Z. It promised the impossible, a naval force unparalleled in history, constructed with astonishing speed and shrouded in utmost secrecy. The price was astronomical, its feasibility questionable, and the ambition seemingly mad. If Germany succeeded in realizing the full potential of Plan Z, the balance of global power could irrevocably shift. In the early 20th century, Germany's ascent as a naval powerhouse was unmistakable. At its peak, the High Seas Fleet stood as the world's second most formidable maritime force, with only the mighty Royal Navy of the United Kingdom surpassing in numbers and firepower. Spearheaded by the might of over 16 dreadnoughts, massive warships with uniformly large-caliber guns, these behemoths embodied the essence of naval strength. Their imposing silhouettes and unmatched firepower rendered earlier battleships obsolete, leading to the term pre-dreadnought for those older vessels. The sheer scale and firepower of the High Seas Fleet was enough to induce a naval arms race between the two European giants, with each side keen to assert their dominance on the high seas. However, World War I would be the High Seas Fleet's reckoning. Despite its grandeur, the fleet spent most of the war confined to its ports, with only a few significant engagements, the most notable being the Battle of Jutland in 1916. While both sides claimed victory, the fleet's inability to defeat the Royal Navy decisively meant that Germany's maritime threat was contained. As World War I concluded with the Treaty of Versailles, Germany's naval aspirations were dealt a fatal blow. The once majestic High Seas Fleet was ordered to be interned at Scapa Flow. In a final act of defiance, much of the fleet was scuttled by its own crews in 1919, preventing their capture. Thus, in a few short years, Germany went from challenging British naval supremacy to witnessing the demise of its seafaring dreams. After the devastation of World War I, Germany faced a bitter pill, the Treaty of Versailles. The once great naval power found itself choked, limited in military might, and confined within stifling boundaries. The German Navy became a mere spectre of its past glory. Specifically, the treaty stipulated that Germany was allowed a navy of only 6 battleships, 6 cruisers, and 12 destroyers, with a total personnel not exceeding 15,000 men. The treaty imposed strict tonnage limits on these vessels. Battleships and cruisers could not exceed 10,000 tons each. The caliber of guns aboard these ships was also capped at 11 inches, barring Germany from equipping its navy with the heavy artillery that once threatened the naval balance of power in Europe. A complete prohibition on submarines seemed to seal its fate, as this ban extinguished the potential for one of Germany's most feared naval assets from the Great War. But history has repeatedly shown that when one door closes, another opens. This was especially true for the determined minds of German engineers and strategists who stared down these limitations and envisioned a way out. The Panzerschiff emerged as their answer. Known by the Allies as pocket battleships, these vessels meticulously adhered to the treaty's weight limits but carried a secret weapon. 6 hulking 11-inch guns, the maximum caliber permitted, mounted on a ship designed to remain under the weight limit. The guns dwarfed those on most cruisers, showcasing German ingenuity in exploiting the treaty's tonnage and armament restrictions to their advantage. It was a vessel that the British didn't ever think was possible, yet it wasn't just a ship, it was a strategy. The pocket battleship was built on a simple premise. If confronted by a faster enemy, outgun them. If faced with a stronger foe, outrun them. The Deutschland-class ships were the embodiment of this approach. Deutschland, the pioneer of this class, set the tone. Later renamed Lutzow, its legacy was carried forward by Admiral Scheer and Admiral Graf Spee. The impact on Europe was palpable. With their speed and might, these pocket battleships posed a direct threat to commercial trade routes. Every voyage they undertook sent ripples of unease across European powers. The shadow of the pocket battleship loomed large over every strategic naval discussion, reigniting fears and memories of Germany's earlier naval prowess. Recognizing the gravity of this new threat, Britain took the lead in countering Germany's naval resurgence. The King George V class battleships and the Dido-class light cruisers were their direct answer. France too wasted no time, launching the Dunkirk and Strasbourg with one aim in mind: counter the looming German menace. The pocket battleships were more than just simple defiance of the Treaty of Versailles. They were the vanguard of Germany's return to naval prominence and a wake-up call to naval powers worldwide, drawing attention to the inadequacy of the treaty's provisions in curbing Germany's naval ambitions. (1933) marked a pivotal turn for Germany. Adolf Hitler's ascent to power signaled a seismic shift in political ideology and an insatiable hunger to reclaim Germany's militaristic glory. This drive to rearmament, however, was meticulously covert, each move masked to deceive international eyes. Hitler embraced the already brewing pocket battleships, but the hidden gem was a secret Dutch company in The Hague that would build a new force to shake the oceans. Experiments were already underway for new and formidable U-boats, initial versions of which were prowling for Turkey and Finland. The strategic upheaval caused by the pocket battleships etched a clear path in Hitler's mind. Germany's naval fleet needed a radical overhaul to challenge the monolithic Royal Navy. By 1932, the foundation for change was being laid brick by brick. The Reichstag greenlit the Schiffbauersatzplan, a bold initiative to resurrect the German Navy in distinct phases. The plan's latter phase was crafted specifically to shatter the oppressive chains of Versailles. But March 1933 was when the tides truly began to shift. With the newly minted Enabling Act, Hitler was bestowed with unparalleled power, granting him the ability to bypass traditional legislative checks. Unrestrained, he soon denounced Germany's adherence to Versailles' naval confines, which had maintained the German Navy in the shadow of the mighty British Royal Navy. However, Hitler was no blunt instrument. His tactics blended overt power moves with nuanced diplomacy. The Anglo-German Naval Agreement of 1935 was a testament to this approach. On the face of it, Britain seemed to sanction a German naval might 35% of its own, a move that, while defying Versailles, was a strategic miscalculation. Britain's intentions stemmed from a perception that Versailles had perhaps gone too far. If Germany could defend its territory without threatening Britain, a moderated rearmament seemed reasonable. What they failed to recognize was the depth of Hitler's ambitions. For the Führer, these treaties were not ceilings, but mere starting points. He was adept at spotting gaps in the agreements and was unrelenting in exploiting them. Every oversight, every underestimation was an opportunity for Hitler. With his sights set firmly on the horizon, Hitler steered Germany on a deadly new course, with waves of ambition pushing the nation closer to unparalleled naval dominion. By the mid-1930s, Germany's leadership was meticulously charting a course for a renewed maritime might. Vice Admiral Erich Raeder, helming the Reichsmarine since 1928, harbored expansive visions. Taking a page from history, he was inspired by the long-range surface raiders of the Royal Navy, the very forces that had checkmated Germany's naval endeavors in World War I. As 1938 dawned, with Germany's intensifying foreign assertiveness, a confrontation with Britain appeared inevitable. However, Hitler projected a different timeline. In his mind, and the assurances he gave to Raeder, war was reserved for the distant horizon of 1948. With such a window, Raeder believed that Germany could sculpt a maritime force rivaling the bygone era, a fleet so monumental it could confront the behemoth of the Royal Navy head-on. In the autumn of 1938, a pivotal conclave convened. Its mission, to assess Germany's naval pulse and blueprint the path to resurgence. The iconic battleships Bismarck and Tirpitz emerged as keystones in Hitler's strategy, with 6 more H-class battleships reinforcing the vision. These titans would become the spearhead of the envisioned navy. However, Raeder held a divergent stance, championing the surface raider approach. He drafted Plan X, emphasizing long-range cruisers, Panzerschiffe and U-boats to cripple British trade. Iterative thought led to Plan Y and eventually the culminating Plan Z. After Hitler's perusal and tweaks, this ambitious strategy received the green light in March 1939, precariously close to the clouds of conflict. The blueprint was staggering. 10 battleships, 3 battlecruisers, 4 carriers, 15 Panzerschiffe, a slew of cruisers, scouts, destroyers and an armada of 90 U-boats, totaling a colossal 230 vessels. Bismarck, Tirpitz, 4 Scharnhorst battleships and 3 operational Panzerschiffe were foundational pillars. Beyond mere power projection, Germany sought a seat at the global naval table, aligning with the terms of the Washington Naval Treaty, hoping for a semblance of international integration. The timeline was set, a fully realized fleet by 1948. Should peace hold until 1945, Germany could re-emerge as a naval titan, wielding a maritime might that would leave the world in awe. Perhaps most curiously, the late 1930s saw a serious underestimation of the war-making potential of the submarine by both leading naval powerhouses, Germany and Britain. Memories of the catastrophic U-boat raids during World War I had faded, and both nations seemed dismissive of the submarine's potency in future conflict. Britain, wielding its advancements in sonar technology, new cruisers, and the seasoned experience of its Royal Navy, felt prepared to neutralize the U-boat threat. This overconfidence was perilously close to becoming their Achilles' heel. Had Germany leaned into U-boat production instead of obsessing over a grand surface fleet, the course of the war could have veered dramatically. At the heart of Germany's naval strategy was a clash of titans, Erich Raeder and Karl Dönitz, both World War I veterans, but with profoundly different naval philosophies. While Raeder envisaged a renaissance of Germany's maritime glory, with a colossal surface fleet as outlined in Plan Z, Dönitz had his sights set below the waves. Having commanded a U-boat in the previous war, Dönitz was certain that submarines held the key to Britain's maritime chokehold. He pictured a swarm of U-boats working in lethal wolf packs as the linchpin to strangulate Britain's maritime supply routes. Plan Z, which only called for 90 U-boats, enraged Dönitz. He desperately tried to sway both Raeder and Hitler to bolster U-boat numbers, arguing that only a vast submarine armada could genuinely threaten the British Isles. But to the German High Command, just as to the British, U-boats seemed outmoded, vulnerable to the Royal Navy's new anti-submarine tools. However, the onset of World War II painted a different narrative. The eagerly anticipated pocket battleships set the Atlantic aflame. Graf Spee's reign between September and December 1939 saw it sink 9 ships, totaling over 50,000 gross register tons. Later, between October 1940 and April 1941, Admiral Scheer's Atlantic and Indian Ocean missions claimed 17 merchant ships, totaling a staggering 113,223 GRT. These early victories by the pocket battleships rekindled faith in Plan Z for both Raeder and Hitler. The surface fleet's triumphs seemed to validate their vision. However, translating this ambitious plan into reality, especially amidst the chaos of war, was a monumental challenge. The first steps of Plan Z were the light battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, which featured 9 guns and provided German naval shipbuilders with experience building vessels of that type. The skills developed in this phase were expected to come in handy when working on the construction of their massive new fleet. Still, Germany had to hastily relearn how to build larger, more powerful ships, as they had been building smaller vessels with guns no larger than 11 inches for decades, and as Plan Z was executed, the lack of larger guns became a real obstacle. The real marvel of Plan Z lay in the proposed Bismarck-class battleships. These titans of the seas, of which Bismarck and Tirpitz were the flag-bearers, boasted impressive weapons. Their primary armament consisted of 8 38cm or 15-inch SK C-34 guns housed in 4 twin-gun turrets. These behemoths dwarfed much of what the Royal Navy had in service. Their design was a testament to Germany's engineering prowess and signaled their intent to be a formidable naval force. Yet even the Bismarck class paled in comparison to what was to come. The H-class battleships. 6 of these juggernauts were planned, promising to carry 8 40.6 centimeters or 16-inch guns, making them potential rivals to the best of British and even some American battleships. However, by 1939, only the first 2 ships had been laid down, and the outbreak of World War II meant their completion became increasingly unlikely. The unpredictable realities of warfare soon overshadowed Germany's grand plans. War resources, both material and financial, were redirected towards more immediate concerns. The metals reserved for the H-class now found urgent use in armoring tanks, crafting munitions and building aircraft. By November 1941, the H-class dream was shelved, with contracts for 4 of the ships never even seeing commencement. In stark contrast to the massive surface fleet ambitions was the initially overlooked potential of U-boats. Under the guidance of Karl Donitz, the U-boat strategy was further refined into deadly wolf pack tactics, where groups of submarines would hunt in coordinated strikes. By 1940, the U-boats had sunk over 2.8 million tons of Allied shipping, highlighting their efficacy. As the war progressed, Germany's initial skepticism towards submarine warfare began to wane. The early successes of the pocket battleships like the Graf Spee, which sunk 9 ships totaling over 50,000 gross register tons, were overshadowed by mounting losses and the effectiveness of the British Royal Navy's countermeasures. In the end, of the 230 vessels envisioned in Plan Z, a mere 82 were ever realized. The majority of those were the ships initially planned and predated the ambitious designs of the plan. Plan Z's downfall was not due to a lack of vision or engineering prowess. Instead, it was the rapid onset of World War II and the changing tides of naval warfare that rendered the plan a dream unfulfilled. Still, the moment that would finally seal the fate of Plan Z for the rest of the war happened in the heat of battle. In warfare, singular moments can redefine strategies and alter the course of entire campaigns. In the history of Germany's World War II naval ambitions, the Battle of the Barents Sea on December 31, 1942, stands out as such a moment. The stakes were high. Convoy JW-51B was destined for the USSR, loaded with over 200 tanks, more than 2,000 vehicles, 120 aircraft, fuel, and other vital supplies. Their protection, though seemingly modest against the might of the Kriegsmarine, was effective. 6 British destroyers, 2 small warships, 2 trawlers, and a minesweeper stood guard, ensuring these vital resources reached their Soviet allies. Germany's heavy cruiser, Admiral Erich, the Panzerschiffe Deutschland, and a fleet of 6 destroyers faced them in the polar night, where visibility played tricks on even the most experienced naval eyes. When the smoke cleared, the Germans had lost a destroyer, and the once formidable Deutschland was wounded. The British, though not without their own casualties, had successfully ensured that all merchant vessels arrived unscathed at their Soviet destination. This engagement had ramifications beyond the icy waters of the Barents Sea. Disappointed and furious at the outcome, Hitler, once a staunch advocate for the surface fleet, ordered the existing warships to be scrapped. This prompted Admiral Erich Raeder, a longtime supporter of a surface fleet and architect of Plan Z, to resign in protest. His replacement, former U-boat officer Karl Donitz, was tasked with a challenging proposition: calming an enraged Führer. While Donitz managed to stave off the scrapping of the entire fleet, these surface ships were relegated to the backbench. They sat idly, unused and unrepaired, their once great promise now squandered. Germany's focus shifted from these leviathans of the sea to the silent hunters lurking below its surface, the U-boats. This renewed focus brought forth a haunting question: what if Germany had concentrated on U-boats from the very beginning? Historians and naval experts have long debated this. German naval historian Erich Groener's review, German Warships from 1815 to 1945, postulates a staggering potential. The funds allocated to Plan Z could have financed over 100 U-boats, positioning Germany as a formidable submarine power by the war's outset. However, this pivot towards submarine warfare came too late. By the time U-boats became Germany's primary naval weapon in 1943, the tide of the naval war had turned irrevocably against the Kriegsmarine. The Battle of the Barents Sea wasn't just a skirmish amidst icy waters. It was a turning point, steering the course of German naval strategy away from its ambitious surface fleet dreams towards the grim reality of submarine warfare. Plan Z often emerges as a tantalizing alternate history scenario in the intricate tapestry of World War II's history. This cancelled German naval strategy, with its blueprint for a strengthened navy against the Allies, continues to intrigue historians, military strategists, and enthusiasts. The enduring enigma remains: could this ambitious strategy have tilted the outcome of the war in Germany's favour? Even if Plan Z had been set into motion earlier, granting the Germans a vital head start, it remains doubtful that it would have seriously hampered the Allied war effort. By its projected completion in 1948, the British Royal Navy, with its deep-seated naval traditions and experience, would have likely fielded its own set of advancements. Such progress might well have offset any initial gains the German Navy could have achieved. Furthermore, the collective naval prowess of the Allies, the UK, US and USSR, presented an overwhelming challenge. Even with the backing of Japanese and Italian naval forces, Germany's Kriegsmarine would have faced an uphill battle. This is especially true considering the United States' monumental Two-Ocean Navy Act of 1940, which aimed to expand the US Navy by an impressive 70%. Such a move would have left the German fleet outgunned and outnumbered. It's also crucial to factor in the growing naval ambitions of the Soviet Union. If the onset of the war had been delayed, the Soviets' expanding fleet would have posed an additional challenge to German maritime dominance. Beyond mere numbers, the strategic implications of Plan Z are noteworthy. A fortified German navy would undoubtedly have presented a more direct invasion threat to the British Isles, perhaps compelling Britain to allocate more resources to home defences. However, any strategic advantage Germany might have gained would likely have been counterbalanced by the Allies' numerical strength and evolving naval tactics. Considering the long-term dynamics of the war, it's not just the initial strength of a fleet that determines its success, but its capacity to sustain operations, innovate, and evolve with the ever-shifting theatre of warfare. Thus, while the imagery of a fully realized Plan Z, with German battleships asserting dominance over vast swathes of the seas, is certainly imposing, the prevailing consensus among experts is clear. Even with the bolstered Kriegsmarine of Plan Z's vision, the tide of the war would likely have remained unaltered, with the Allied naval forces' collective strength, experience and adaptability proving decisive against the Third Reich's maritime dreams.